Hey there, folks. Let's take a look at this week's astrological report for July 22nd through July 28th of 2025. I hope you're doing well. So this week we have some pretty big changes taking place. In fact, today we just had the sun change signs and ingress Leo for a change of season and a change of focus. At the same time, we just had the moon change signs today into Cancer, and the moon has just entered the dark moon phase and will be closing out the last cycle in Cancer for the next 2.5 days until the moon reaches the sun by Thursday, July 24th for the Leo new moon cycle. And we start this fresh new cycle for the next month. Now, just looking at the zodiac, there's a lot of planets in early degrees. Early degrees are a sense of new beginnings, and that's where all the outer planets are in this very rare dynamic in this minor grand trine, talking about the world in this transition into this new era that's trying to be developed. And as we enter this Leo new moon cycle, we're connected to all those in aspects. So the sun, there's a lot of solar aspects this week. The sun is opposite Pluto. The sun is sextile Uranus. The sun is trine Saturn and Neptune. So it's really focused on these new beginnings in the world and in personal lives within this new moon cycle coming up. Plus the moon will go through all those aspects as well after it closes out this current Cancer cycle. So again, a lot of new beginnings are going to be showing more and more throughout this next month. So that's a big part of this week, is the sun making a lot of aspects, but it's definitely going to be, a big change of season that we're entering into with new dynamics that we'll be showing. Now we also have this Mars that's only a degree away from the South Node, but that was already perfected last week, Mars South Node conjunction and this big fateful dynamic in the air. It's still a little bit relevant. Mars is still so close. It's going to take a little time for Mars to separate from that. That's also a little bit of a challenging aspect for sure for people in general. And so for the rest of this week, Mars will slowly be moving away from that dynamic. But Venus and Mars are still perfecting their last quarter phase this week with Venus square Mars, plus also wrapped up into that fateful dynamic that I talked about last week. And one example that we saw in the world about that T-square with Venus and Mars wrapped up in fate was, that couple that got caught at the concert having an affair. That was very fateful how, it had a long-term effect for everybody involved. And it was a tension dynamic, with the square aspect between Venus and Mars. In some cases, it can be a little more positive, but I think generally it is a little bit more challenging for people in personal relationships. Of course, that's just generally speaking. It doesn't mean every single relationship had a major issue or will have a major issue this week. It all depends on how this aligns with your chart and your own relationship. But in the sky, generally speaking, this is reflecting a lot of tension with masculine and feminine dynamics, which will continue. And again, both of this Venus and Mars square is being ruled by Mercury retrograde. But now that the sun has changed signs, the sun is in charge. Everything is going to lead back to the sun here, including this Mercury retrograde in Leo. It's ruled by the sun. So there starts to be this change of dynamic as well of how people are thinking and processing certain information and thoughts and things of the past. All right, so that's looking like the main event, the Venus square Mars and the sun making all these aspects. And then, like I said, the Leo new moon coming up on Thursday. Venus will also make a sextile to Chiron by next Monday. And this is the last week for Venus in Gemini. Next week, Venus will ingress Cancer. That'll also really start to change general relationship dynamics as well after, this strong dynamic that Venus and Mars are going through. All right, so this week, the moon waning in the dark moon phase through Cancer, starts that Leo new moon, starts waxing all through Leo, starts waxing all through Virgo, and then will ingress Libra by next Monday. So this week, the moon will be conjunct Jupiter, the sun, Mercury, the South Node, and Mars. So we'll end the week with that moon kind of reaching that fateful dynamic and closing things out of this more fateful kind of vibe in the air for Venus and Mars dynamics. All right, so that's the general gist of what's ahead. I'm going to be going through the chart day by day. Be sure to check out the description with all these aspects written out for you. There's a link if you want to buy a personalized report from me as well. And there's timestamps to follow along throughout the week. All right, let's get started here for today on Tuesday. Be moving this to the hour. Okay, so again, we just today, everything is starting to change. The mood, the vibes, the circumstances, as the moon has just changed signs from Gemini the last couple days now into Cancer. And like I said, it's the dark moon phase today on Tuesday, July 22nd. So the moon is in charge of itself. It's in its home sign, so it's very strong here. And the sun is now in its home sign of Leo for this big change of season that just started today. So both the sun and the moon are technically happy in their own signs, and they're much stronger than they have been now. So that can be helpful for people. We're coming into a much stronger position, but there's a little bit of a contradiction in that today, as again, the moon, even though it's in its own sign and happy, it's in the dark moon phase. There's no light on the moon. And it's also starting to square, as I'm making this report, starting to square Saturn and Neptune first thing this morning. Plus that Mars next to the South Node can still be a little bit weak and draining and challenging for some people. So even though we're beginning to see this change of dynamic come in, it's still in the early process, and we're going to see strength build more and more as time goes on this week. So the moon here in Cancer for the next 2.5 days, again, it's about closing things out of the past. Typically, the dark moon phase is a little more private, a little more behind the scenes for people. At least the mood is that way. And generally, the moon coming into Cancer is more about your inner world. It's much more of a sensitive phase that's just now starting. Generally about home and family, feelings, needs, the need to nurture and take care of yourself, which was a part of the whole last Cancer cycle that we're kind of wrapping up within this dynamic. But things will improve because the moon is next to Jupiter. It's just that the moon has to get through this square with Saturn and Neptune first, plus some inconjunctions like the inconjunction to Pluto that the moon has to get through. So I think early morning here, first thing on Tuesday morning, is going to be a little more challenging, but as the day goes on, especially by this evening, tonight, when the moon reaches that Jupiter, that's a pretty big emotional mood that will start to come in. And big needs, big nurturing, big feelings. I guess that could be for good or bad. It can go either way. And again, this is the dark moon phase, so emotions aren't as conscious right now. Being in the dark moon phase, again, there's no light. There's no consciousness on this moon. It's closing it out and preparing for this more outward solar kind of focus coming up. But again, we have the symbol of new beginnings with both the sun and the moon in the early degrees of a sign. So today the moon starts off, well, before it changed signs, the moon was sextile Chiron. It's past that already. And now the moon in Cancer is, again, the next two aspects are going to be the square to Saturn and Neptune. So this is the moon in a first quarter square with Saturn and Neptune from when the moon was conjunct Saturn and Neptune last week. And so this is about feelings that are picking up on this new beginning. And it also has a lot to say about the self versus your feelings, your needs, home and family, domestic life. Typically, the moon here would show people generally just would rather sleep in. I know I would rather sleep in for sure. But generally, it's more about just kind of being more lazy, or kind of like, again, your home, your inner world would be a strong need. Now, of course, that's just generally speaking. But that square to Saturn does show there's some pressure, there's some heaviness, plus the square to Neptune. Maybe some emotional confusion. Maybe some people are out of it a little bit for the first part of today. Or some worry, some stress, something that has to get done. The first quarter is about having to overcome challenges in some way, to move forward, to not retreat or give up on something, but to, take the initiative. Just like I said, I would rather sleep in, but I had this report to get done. and I had to get up like I do every single day. I don't sleep in any days. But that's what it's about. It's not about like giving up. It's about moving forward with responsibilities, commitments, duties, obligations. But because of the square to Neptune, there can still be a little bit of confusion or uncertainty or kind of fogginess, lack of clarity in some ways, or kind of people wrapped up in their own imagination or even delusions in some cases. But again, because these are early degrees, it's really this moon that's picking up on emotional pressure about the future, about this new beginning in the world or in personal lives that are trying to be established and move forward. So that's not going to last long. It's just the first part of today. Just give it the first half of today with that moon square Saturn and Neptune before things ease up a little bit. But then right after that, the moon does have to make this in conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius, that green line there, also known as the quincunx. So that's where the moon, being the circumstances and the general mood of people, are having to adjust and adapt to Pluto, the power dynamic within groups, friends, community, politics, the intensity and transformation in the world that's taking place. So it's like people generally want to have this more inward vibe of the moon in Cancer, and sensitive and emotional, and this need to nurture self or others. But again, there's like an irritation with that green line to Pluto, a little bit of this intensity that we're still picking up on in the outer world. That's not going to last long. Like I said, all this will kind of fade away by the afternoon hours as the moon gets past those dynamics. And then the next two aspects will be probably a lot easier, as the moon, like I said, will be conjunct Jupiter by this evening. Or I guess it's technically tonight. It'll be pretty late tonight for everybody. Early morning hours for people on the East Coast, and then super early hours of Wednesday morning for people in Europe. But moon conjunct Jupiter tonight, again, that's a big mood for good or bad. It's typically more positive. It's more nurturing. It's more giving. It's more generous. And it's like big mother energy in a sense. So big nurturing vibes. It could be a need to have like comfort food tonight, and kind of be in more of a comfortable position. Safety, security, and comfort is all a strong desire. Things are really big and amplified, though. The mood is really big and amplified by tonight. It is still the dark moon phase, so there's no light on this moon. It's more of a behind the scenes type of vibe, generally speaking. But yet we have this big change of season at the same time taking place all day today with the sun ingress Leo. And the sun is building up that sextile right off the bat to Uranus, connecting to, again, things that are new and focused on things that are new. But the sun in Leo is very strong. It's the king-queen position for the sun to be in, its own sign. And so confidence starts to build, and the need for self-expression and creativity and being more outward, and generally a strong social dynamic is going to be building, especially as we get to this new moon cycle and start building that new moon. So we're kind of in between right now, between the inner life and the outer life, both kind of being a big part of the dynamics right now. But still, the sun is strong, and this is going to be the season for solar figures to be really shining bright and expressing themselves out in the open more and more. So things start to get a lot more dramatic and passionate within this cycle, and intensity. There's going to be a lot of intensity building up because of, again, the sun is opposing Pluto. Now, I'm going to talk more about that when we get to this new moon on Thursday, but it's already happening right now, and every day of this week, there's a strong opposition to Pluto, which is basically an opposition between the light and the dark. And if you think about it, anything that's opposite the sun is like in its fullness. So even though Pluto technically is really far away and you can't see it, from the Earth without, technology, it's still symbolically Pluto is at its brightest, strongest position because it's opposite the sun. So there's a strong focus and a strong light that's being reflected off Pluto back to people in general, which is going to be a part of this new moon cycle that I'm going to talk more about here. But just know that there is this light and dark aspect that's building for this whole lunar cycle, and especially this week. All right, and the last aspect is the sun tonight making that sextile to Uranus. So this is also a little bit of it's a very youthful dynamic with 0 degrees of the sun in Leo and 0 degrees of Uranus in Gemini, which we have never seen before in our lifetime with this fresh new dynamic here. First time the sun in our lifetime has connected to this sextile. So this is very, very fresh and new, but it's generally people, generally speaking here, that are expressing themselves through communication in ways that maybe are a little bit more unpredictable, more dramatic, because this Uranus in Gemini is ruled by Mercury retrograde in Leo. And then that Mercury is ruling the square between Venus and Mars and the nodes of fate there. So it still comes back to a lot of dramatic communication going on in the world and in the media, but also solar figures connecting to this Uranus vibe. Solar figures are more dramatic, more unpredictable with what they're saying and communicating and thinking about. And we're all, generally speaking, having this focus on thinking outside the box, being more innovative with new ideas, new thoughts that are being expressed out in the open more. So it's also a little bit more of a rebellious leadership type of vibe. The sun in Leo is typically about leaders. And so there's a connection to things that are new and fresh and different that are really coming into our focus and our attention from this point forward. All right, so those are the aspects for Tuesday. Let's move this forward to Wednesday. On July 23, the moon gets past Jupiter, but it's going to be with Jupiter all through the overnight hours into Wednesday morning. And let's see, the first aspect is Venus-Mars exactly square for Wednesday morning. Again, that's kind of an aspect that was in play all last week and will continue most of this week as well, but it's perfecting here on Wednesday morning. So again, Venus and Mars, they're in their last quarter of this entire Venus-Mars cycle. So in a way, it's the crisis in consciousness phase with the lovers, and Venus here in Gemini, it's more about generally being more, both of these planets are in positions of the mind. Both this Venus-Mars aspect is up in the head because they're both being ruled by Mercury in retrograde in Leo. So it's about kind of somehow, generally speaking, there's a lot of reflecting on relationship and how people are thinking about it, going back to things of the past, things that have happened in the past, could be thought about now and could be relevant. And like I said, it's kind of still this fateful dynamic. And we saw that, like I said, in the world and how it played out on the mundane level. There was a lot of individual things that happened too that, of course, don't get the headlines. And there was even, in some cases, breakups and other issues within relationships. Again, it doesn't mean every single person, obviously. Maybe you weren't affected in your personal relationship. Basically when there's difficult relationship aspects in the sky, it's going to affect every relationship different based on that relationship. So if a relationship is strong, it can get through these general aspects. But if a relationship has cracks in it, then those cracks are going to start to show. There's going to be more issues that come out. There's more pressure in the relationship that starts to show. So it all depends on the strength of each relationship. And then also, if we look at a composite chart of a relationship where you combine each individual birth chart that creates a relationship chart, then you put these transits to that relationship composite chart, you'll see what the relationship is going through as well. Plus these transits to individual charts is also going to make a difference. So it gets pretty complicated, but I can only generally speak based on, the whole world, what I'm trying to look at here. So there's a lot of tension in relationship, basically, but it's a lot of mental, intellectual tension. And it all depends on if that's being expressed or not and communicated or not. I would think that now that the sun is connecting to Uranus in a sextile, people are more impulsive in the way that they're communicating, because now Mercury retrograde, that's in charge of both the Venus and Mars dynamic, it's being ruled by the sun. Whereas before, the sun was in Cancer and it was more about feelings and a feeling-based kind of a dynamic. Now it's more of this outward, expressive dynamic that could be showing more and more. That can also be more dramatic as time goes on here. Plus the opposition to Pluto can start to build power dynamics, power and control issues within certain relationships, the undercurrents of what's going on, the unspoken as well. And again, this battle between light and dark. But I'm just going to say it now. I'll say it again when we get to the new moon. But a lot of times with the sun opposite Pluto, and this isn't the case for all Sun-Pluto aspects, it's mostly what I'm saying here is about the opposition. The opposition tends to play out about making the other person the dark bad guy, projecting out that there's something dark about somebody else and not the self, when really the sun is reflecting its light on Pluto, and that's like a mirror reflecting back to the sun. So a lot of times with the sun opposite Pluto, people need to recognize their own dark side, their own shadow tendencies, and not project it on everybody else. Because when we project the shadow on everybody else, we attract that more and more because it's a reflection, but if we can accept our own shadow and dark side and accept that, yeah, we're not perfect and it's not just about everybody else, and we have a role in things that we go through in our lives, and we look at all those things honestly and have a more mature standpoint, then we're not going to get that projection back and that reflection back from other people, or we're not going to attract those shadowy dynamics as much. So, that's a lot of times how it plays out with the opposition, is projecting the dark side and rejecting the dark side and making it about everybody else and not the self. So, that can play out within these relationship dynamics as well, of looking at the other person as the problem and doing something that, is outrageous in your mind in some cases. And you're like, I would never do that. Well, maybe you would, or maybe you have, but still, it's about looking at the dark and the light and trying to bring a better balance between them. It's also a culmination point between the light and the dark. Again, the dark is becoming light. Pluto is the underworld. It's everything that's hidden and shadowy. And now Pluto is at its brightest point for the rest of this week, symbolically. So it's like, again, being lit up. All the stuff that's normally hidden and dark and deep is being lit up to be seen. It can also be the anti-hero dynamic in these particular signs building up as well, where you're going to see some solar figure taking charge in more of a shadowy way. A lot of times when there's a opposition in Leo to this new Pluto in Aquarius, somebody steps up and does something very dramatic and bold, and then the rest of the world, looks at them as very evil, which in some cases they can definitely be evil and evil acts of what they're doing. But it can sometimes be somebody doing something in the world, another event this week potentially, or because it's a part of the new moon, it could also be within this whole entire Leo cycle. This next 2 weeks building up to the full moon, we could see another big event that could play out around, something happening, like there's been assassinations with this. There's been a lot of events of just somebody doing something that's pretty bold and outrageous. But again, I think you just keep in mind, this concept of light and dark that's being exposed this week. All right, so that's a big part of things as well as we're going through this week. And the Venus square Mars dynamic, they're just kind of on two different pages, basically. The feminine and masculine are on two different pages. Venus doesn't want to get too wrapped up in a lot, generally speaking, Venus shows that people, even more specifically, generally the feminine doesn't want to get wrapped up into a lot of deep, serious, intense dynamics, whereas Mars over here in Virgo could be a little more critical, in relationship and how it's being expressed. And Venus in Gemini generally wants to be more playful and lighthearted and witty and doing a variety of different things and communicating and all these things. And Mars is trying to be more detailed and take care of business and work and, organization. And there could also be health stuff going on that's adding tension in the relationship. There could be a variety of different issues. It's just basically they're on two different pages. And again, there could be something from the past that's having an effect generally as well, since Mercury's retrograde and Mars and Venus are wrapped around this South Node aspect between the past. So there's past dynamics that are influencing relationships, generally speaking, in some way. All right, so just know that there's more friction, there's more tension, generally speaking, in relationships, especially romantic, but it can also play out in other ways. It can be working relationships even that have some tension, some undercurrents going on. The way people are communicating and expressing themselves within general relationships could have some issues. Edginess, irritation, and again, the need to be processing the way people are thinking about relationship is a part of the issue that's going through this dynamic where people are going to figure something out. Now, that's not going to be a long-lasting aspect. It's already been last week. It'll be the rest of this week. And then, next week, Venus will change signs, Mars will change signs, and things will start to change and improve. But that's the main aspect for Wednesday, other than the moon in the dark moon phase connecting to the nodes of fate as well. Moon sextile South Node and trine the North Node as the day goes on Wednesday. So again, it's kind of that overplay of fate and destiny connected to relationship dynamics. Circumstances are connecting to fate and destiny. The future, there's an opening to show you the future of whatever's happening here on Wednesday afternoon, evening. Circumstances could be pushing you forward on the path that you're meant to be on. But there's also things of the past that need to be dealt with. Work, health, home and family dynamics, needs, emotions, and feelings are still very strong here. And then the moon is sextile that Mars. So emotions and feelings are connecting to that more, the Mars side, the more aggressive side, critical side. But it's a sextile, so it's a little more smooth in that way. So it's also a great dynamic if people have the energy, because again, the moon is in a dark moon phase and Mars is next to the South Node, which can be a little bit draining. But, it's also saying that there's potential here to get things done, work and service about home and family projects or health issues. The moon in Cancer is a great place, plus Jupiter there, is a great place for healing. And then generally, Virgo deals with health issues as well. So taking action on health, nurturing, healing kind of vibes. If that's the case for some people on Wednesday night, there's a great aspect for it. Or again, just general organization in the home or projects that you could be doing on Wednesday with that sextile. And perhaps, again, taking care of things of the past potentially with that connection to the South Node. All right, so that's Wednesday. Let's get to the following day on Thursday, and this is the big day of the new moon, July 24th. The moon starts off at the end of Cancer until it ingresses to Leo, but before it changes signs, the moon is squaring Chiron. We did see a lot of things on the mundane level last week with the sun square Chiron that I pointed out, accidents and injuries. In LA, that guy drove into the crowd of people and a bunch of people were hurt. There was different things all around the world that took place. And that's why I don't usually look at Chiron so much in hard aspects as healing. It's more about wounding when I see it, especially in the sign of Aries. Now, that will be different in different signs, but it can be internal stuff for some people, confidence issues as well. but the moon connecting to it is on this more emotional level. There could still be some issues here, though. You have to be careful a little bit on Thursday, early morning hour, so late Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. The mood, confidence, feelings could be sensitive, vulnerable. Still could be some accidents and injuries taking place, but it's basically closing that out before this new beginning takes place. So some emotional sensitivity, most likely. Early morning hours. And then we see that the sun makes the perfect aspect to Saturn, which will be pretty much all day long and also part of the new moon. So the sun, the solar energy, is connecting to Saturn of responsibility in this fire dynamic. And the moon is about to change signs into fire. So we're going to get more passion, more fiery, generally speaking, people in their self-expression, but also connected to authority, responsibility, commitments, duty. And again, the sun is connected to this apex that Saturn and Neptune are at of the minor grand trine for the outer planets that this new era, this new world that's trying to be developed is talking about. So we're putting a big spotlight, a big focus on government and leadership in the world on the mundane level, and big things that are showing about world leaders and government rules, systems, policies, structures, and systems that are being restructured. There's a big focus on that most likely throughout this week and maybe even Thursday, but even it's the new moon. It's connected to this whole next, entire lunar cycle that will be seeing a lot of that focus on this new world and what it's all about. The moon is still in this really dark moon phase, though, before it changes signs and reaches the sun. But there's still this good connection to be more outward, more active, especially when that moon changes signs here. So connecting to Saturn and Neptune. Also, even though it's not exact yet, the sun is, let's see here, the sun is trine Neptune later that day, but it's already relevant right here, first thing on Thursday morning. So the sun is also focused on Neptune. So that can be a focus on conspiracies in some cases with government stuff that's been ongoing and new developments around that, a turning point for big things about conspiracies and scandals that have been playing out in certain ways. And then also, like I said, it's about the future and what action needs to be taken and how to get there, and people being more bold and fiery in their self-expression, and then connected to dreams and fantasies and things that are inspiring for some people, what they want to build, what they want to structure, what they want to accomplish in this new era. I think that as time goes on here with this new moon cycle coming in, people are going to start to get more in touch with their future and what they really want. I think there's a lot of cases where people have some uncertainty about their future, what they want, what they need, where they're going with this Neptune in this position. But remember, this Neptune is still connected to things of the past. It's going to come back to Pisces, and then it's going to fully come back to this position for next year of 2026, which is the true new beginning. So we have this whole year transition point that we're going to get more and more in touch with what this future is all about for the world and on individual levels. So I think there's a short-term dynamic here coming up that's going to kind of give us more clues, more insights, and more inspiration about individual possibilities and what you would want to create and build for this next era of your life. A lot of things are going to be changing. This is one of those moments in time where, a lot of people can be stuck for years and not see changes. Even if they go through hard aspects, in some cases, some people can be resistant to change and just be stuck in their world. This is one of those times where over this next year or two, a lot of people, whether they like it or not, are going to have to deal with changes and find new ways of living and just accept things that are outside of their control, that life just throws at people that says, nope, it's time to change whether you like it or not. So, not saying it's instant, but it's on a case-by-case basis over this next couple of years, and it can play out in that way different times for different people. It could be the time for some people right now that you're forced to step into new territory and start doing new things. And other people, it might be next year or the year after that. So just be ready, though. Generally, this is saying most of the world is going to be changing. All right, so there's that. And then the moon ingresses Leo, big mood change coming in as the day goes on. This is late morning, afternoon hours, depending on where you live. And again, both the sun and the moon are connected to this minor grand trine with Uranus at the apex now. Revolutionary thoughts, revolutionary ideas, more radical communication, more changes in the world around technology, more changes around transportation and travel and what's going on in the streets. I'm seeing more and more stories about new things coming out around transportation. A lot of AI, a lot of driverless taxis, cars, even a wagon of some sort, something. A lot of new technology basically showing more and more. And it's only the very, very beginning of this. So basically, this is a revolutionary dynamic with Uranus here in this fresh new way that we've never seen before at the apex. Plus, it's 0 degrees, like the newest there is of the zodiac. The 0 degrees is the youngest, the newest. And the sun and moon are also in this new, fresh dynamic, plus Saturn and Neptune wrapped up into it all. The world, what's going on in the world with government systems and structures, it's all being really highlighted here as we're going through this week. And then we officially reach this new moon. And this is where, again, the sun is connected to everything, including, once we get to that new moon, then both the sun and the moon are in this opposition with Pluto. So let's get to this new moon, and I'll talk about that. Let me just align it perfectly. It's going to be at 2 degrees. 2 degrees, 8 minutes is exactly this new moon degree. So check your chart. Where do you have Leo in your chart? What area of your life is Leo? Even if you don't have any planets in Leo, you have a certain area of life that is all about Leo. That's where there's a lot of solar energy, a lot of dramatic self-expression, creativity. So generally, this is a very positive cycle that comes in every year. It's just that this particular one is something we've never seen before because, again, of this new moon connected to all of the outer planets in a fresh new way. But the main dynamic of this new moon is the opposition to Pluto. Again, it comes back to this entire cycle starting having this light and dark opposition. And the more you fight the dark, the more you resist and reject the ugliness of life, the more it's going to be right in your face. Now, that's generally speaking, so it also depends on your chart. Do you have any personal planets here at the first few degrees of the fixed signs? People that do have early degrees of the fixed signs are going to be most affected by this dynamic. And if you do have early degrees in the fixed signs, you're already under the Pluto transit. You've already been dealing with Pluto. It's just that now it's more in our face. It's more on this local down-to-earth level that's more relevant with both the moon and the sun connecting to it. So this is generally, the Leo-Aquarius opposition is generally one of the most social 2 signs of the zodiac. So this is a very outward cycle now. The Leo vibe. It's all being ruled by the sun. Now the moon is under the rulership of the sun here. So it stops with the sun. So it's still a very creative cycle for people, but because this new moon is also next to Mercury retrograde, this whole cycle is about Mercury retrograde as well. And needing to go back to the past, in some cases, thinking about the past, dealing with the past, going back to certain places of the past in some cases, communications from the past, or processing certain things that aren't quite done that need to be developed. Looking at your creativity, your passion, what is your heart calling for? This is a cycle to get in touch with the heart, with your passion, your overall creativity, and the future, because again, everything is aligned here with the future that these planets are talking about. So I think people are going to get more in touch, generally speaking, with what their heart is pulling them towards for what's next. But they still might have to complete things of the past in some cases before they're fully ready to move forward into the future with this Mercury retrograde. So if you have any creative projects that you need to go back and complete or fix, this can be a part of this whole cycle. But again, this is a cycle that's going to be about both the light and the dark. It's not just a normal Leo cycle. And so we have to accept that there's something being lit up here in the world about this Pluto, the underworld, the dark, the shadow, the undercurrents of things going on. And again, it can be the anti-hero dynamic of somebody thinking that they're the hero, but doing something very negative and dark, getting attention for something negative and dark. It's going to play out a lot in politics, obviously. This is going to be a strong political cycle. The sun is leadership. The sun is world leaders connecting to Saturn on the world point of authorities and governments. So this is a strong cycle that's going to be coming in to be showing a lot of radical, revolutionary, bold, dramatic dynamics playing out in certain governments around the world that are starting to change. That's becoming more and more obvious. But Pluto is the group and the community. So there's also a lot of opposition to these big world dynamics changing with certain world leaders as well that are being highlighted in more of this negative opposition from group and community and certain organizations and politics. Politics is a huge part of this overall cycle that's going to be very dramatic. So on the lower level, individual level, again, this is a cycle to be getting in touch with your self-expression. The moon here wants to be happy, wants to be joyful for people, generally speaking. People don't want to be wrapped up in seriousness and restrictions and limitations. And technically, because this new moon is trine Saturn and Neptune, there's not a block. This is about the opening now to be really moving forward into this future that's being kind of reflected and highlighted, generally speaking. We're not going to see all the new beginnings that this bigger dynamic is talking about for the world, but we're going to start to see a lot of future progress on what this is, on individual levels, starting to take action in ways that are much more bold. It's just that with Mercury retrograde, there's still going to be a lot of forward progress, but there's going to be a process about that with Mercury retrograde for the rest of July, most of August, and by the end of August, you're going to really see a lot of forward progress. And then we get into eclipse season, which is even more powerful by the end of August into September. So you just have to know that even though Mercury's retrograde, it doesn't mean life stops and doesn't move forward. This is a dynamic that really shows things are going to be moving forward. Keep in mind, Mars is still out in front of everything, and that's why Mars, when it went retrograde, it kind of had to wait. It was going retrograde, kind of waiting for things to start to catch up. Otherwise, it would have been way too far ahead of the main focus of everything else. So now Mars is in reasonable, distance from everything, but it's still leading all of these planets until the sun and all this stuff catches up to Mars and overtakes it. But there's still a sense of things moving forward in new ways. And this will be a cycle that's definitely about that. But again, it's a powerful cycle. It's a transformative cycle. It's a cycle that does deal with the undercurrents, the underworld, in a lot of ways. Again, the dark versus the light. But technically, it's the light shining on the dark, exposing the dark, exposing what was hidden for a long time in some cases. And that can play out in politics. There can be a lot of political exposure coming up within this cycle. But you also have to look at it in your own life. Oppositions tend to play out in personal relationships. Plus the fact that on this new moon, Venus and Mars are still very tightly square. So this opposition of Pluto will play out in individual relationships, including some friendships. Pluto is technically in the area of friends and community. So, you might see some undercurrents, some shadow plays within your friendship dynamics in some cases as well. Maybe some tension in that, maybe even some sexual tension going on inappropriately in some cases because of the Venus-Mars square. Or, again, having to work something out in your own consciousness, your own head about relationship stuff. In some cases, there's also things that are just outside of our control when Pluto is involved. Pluto is always a lesson that we're not in control of every single dynamic of life. People want to be in control. Humans think that they're the ultimate, controlling end game of everything, but they're not. We're connected to something so much bigger that is beyond us. And Pluto always shows us that, things are out of our control as well. Now we have to take our power and take charge and control what is within our control in healthy, appropriate ways, and then release and surrender what's not. So it's about finding that balance with this opposition. And again, finding the balance between being okay with dealing with darker things that aren't as pretty and nice, because usually the Leo cycle wants to be more sunny and bright and happy and joyful and passionate and creative, and it doesn't want to deal with the shadow and the undercurrents. So the more you reject that starts popping up in your life over this next month, shadowy things that you would rather not see or deal with. If you reject it, it's going to be reflected back to you more and more. If you just deal with it, if you accept it, then it doesn't have the same level of power over you. And again, that can be within relationship dynamics. If you're shining all of your energy on some negative person and judging and making them out to be, demonizing people, there's a little bit of an unconsciousness in that. You have to be careful of that. It doesn't mean that it's not true in some cases that somebody is, has done something very dark and ugly, and there can be an acknowledgement for that, but at the same time, be careful of too much judgment in those ways. All right, but overall, this is still a Leo cycle that wants to be creative, have fun, more recreational activities. Unfortunately, on one of the negative sides, it's still going to have something probably with children that takes place over the next couple of weeks as well, I would imagine, some negative event with children. So you'd also have to be careful in this next cycle, I would say the whole month, but also even more so the next 2 weeks probably. Be extra observant of your surroundings and then your children's activities, your children's surroundings, what they're doing in private. Just keep an eye on your children a little better over this next couple weeks. There's possibly something, I don't know, is school going on right now? I don't know if school is in. I'm out of the loop about children and school stuff, but I think that most people are on summer vacation. That could be good. Otherwise, I'd say there could be some school events or something. But just generally keep an eye on children better than normal. All right. So, but overall, this is a cycle to get in touch with what your heart is calling for, like I said, and be more passionate, more creative. People are going to be more dramatic and self-expressive. They want to be more light and sunny and having fun. The Leo new moon cycle is about parties, generally speaking, more social events that want to take place. Keep in mind, during big social events that you could have planned over this next month, there could be dynamics that are outside of your control, that could seem like a little bit of an issue. But when you look back, sometimes it can be like, it's part of the experience as well. So just know that this is a powerful cycle that is going to be very, very transformative for what takes place. So you need to reflect on your creativity. You got to reflect on what, with Mercury retrograde there, like get in touch, go inward and try to figure out what could make you more happy. Maybe you need a happier life. Maybe things have been dull or boring or you're stagnant, you're stuck. What do you need to change? What do you need to do to have a better life, to be more happy life, more fun and creative life? So for me personally, I'm buying a motorcycle. I'm going to go on just a lot more adventures, but I'm going to have to change my work schedule to make that happen because I work literally 7 days a week. So it's like these are the things you have to get in touch with and reflect on and work out. What do you want to do? What is your heart calling for? All right, so, that's how I'm looking at this new moon. Again, do you have any personal planets, especially at 2 degrees of Leo? If you have a personal planet at 2 degrees of Leo, whatever that planet is in your chart, that there's a new beginning for that planet and what it means in your chart. That planet rules other houses in your chart, other areas of life that are also connected. But I would say overall, if you have planets at 2 degrees right now in the fixed signs of Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Taurus, you're under a once-in-a-lifetime Pluto transit that's showing your life is going through big transformations. Now, what I've noticed for personal clients of mine is that the Pluto in Capricorn transit was much, much harsher and worse and negative, generally speaking, than the Pluto in Aquarius. This Pluto in Aquarius is still going to have negative events in certain dynamics and ways, but I'm also seeing that this Pluto in Aquarius is transforming people's lives generally in more of a positive way, which it was not the case for Pluto. Now, the Pluto in Aquarius, the Pluto in Capricorn transit, in the moment, a lot of the things that happened under that Pluto transit seem negative. But in hindsight and down the road, those could also turn into positives because you were forced to change in certain ways that led to more positivity. But in the moment, it didn't always feel positive. But what I'm seeing with this Pluto, and this is just generally because there's exceptions to this, but generally speaking, the Pluto in Aquarius, especially even to early Leo, is showing positive transformations in their life, like having children, getting married, big changes in your life. Now it's still intense. It's still not always comfortable. It's kind of even a sense of like, it's just happening. It's happening whether you like it or not in some way. But there can be a lot of positive transformations with this Pluto in Aquarius. So in some cases, this whole cycle can show some positive transformations as well. It's still going to have that shadow component in other ways and cases, though, that we can't ignore or reject. And then this new moon is trying that Neptune and that Saturn, but the Neptune pretty strong as well. So again, getting in touch with what inspires you, your creativity, your imagination, and this is a fire cycle. Now we have a lot of fire going on. It's about being more outward, being more active, taking the initiative. The Saturn Neptune is still being ruled by Mars in Virgo, so it's still also about you got to take care of the past and finalize things of the past so that you are able and ready to move into the future in new ways. So getting down to the details, organizing, purging, and purifying certain things in your life, are still a part of the process. But it's definitely more of a social outward cycle that's going to be intense and dramatic and very powerful and transformative because of the Pluto. All right, so that is the new moon, and again, wherever you have Leo in your birth chart is where there's a new beginning and where there's a new focus starting to show. So there's going to be a lot of changes to wherever you have Leo in your chart over this next 6 months, basically, until we have a Leo full moon 6 months from now when the transits are in Aquarius. 6 months, things are coming to a head in a bigger way. Yeah, the next 2 weeks, we're going to have a short-term kind of a culmination to what's starting right now. But there's something bigger developing over the next 6 months in your Leo area of life. So that's how I'm seeing the new moon. And again, it has that sextile to Uranus. It's also about new ideas, new thoughts, revolutionary, new things taking place. So all the outer planets connected to it. This is rare. This is super, super rare. And we're going to see a lot about the future trying to show up here. All right, moving forward, we get to I'm on the minute. 1 second here. Move this back to the hour. All right, moving forward, we get to Friday on July 25. Moon is still in Leo, starting to wax forward, starting to build some light up here. The next aspect will be the moon conjunct Mercury. So circumstances and feelings and the mood are really connected to this Mercury in this retrograde process of reevaluating or redoing, looking at things of the past. Strong emotional need for communication, more dramatic communication, more busy and active, doing a variety of different things here on Friday, first thing in the morning. Just much more self-expressive mood for people, generally speaking there. There's only two aspects, the moon conjunct Mercury and then the moon in conjunct to the North Node. So there's also one dynamic first thing in the morning that's perhaps pulling people, well, it's late morning, afternoon, I suppose here. Yeah, afternoon hours. Actually, evening. This is 4:20 something. So evening and night, people are being drawn into behind the scenes or distractions, or again, people drawn into their own world, their own sense of imagination and creativity, and then having to adjust whatever's playing out on Friday that could affect the future as well. And those are the only two aspects for Friday, so it's mostly just this moon waxing forward in this new moon, building light. It's the new moon phase, all on Friday. Seeds are being planted symbolically for the future, whether you're conscious of it or not. And then we get to Saturday, the weekend, on July 26th, and the moon is at the end of Leo, making a sextile to Venus for the first aspect. So this is a better mood now that comes in first thing on Saturday, early morning hours. It's pretty early, so it may not affect everybody because by the time you wake up, the moon will be in Virgo maybe or something. But first thing, early morning hours, moon sextile Venus, very creative and communicative and social, more playful and witty, and it's just a lot more light and fun, kind of a dynamic there. It's easier for people to feel more content and satisfied, in that moment, generally speaking. We've gotten past the opposition with Pluto. So from this point forward, even though the whole cycle is connected to this Pluto, it's still going to be moving away from that opposition day by day. And so the moon sextile Venus is a pretty good mood and circumstances and feelings, especially in this more social, communicative, fun way. Short trips could be a good day for short trips. Still be cautious with traveling and transportation. As I said, last week with the Mercury retrograde, we're seeing a lot of transportation issues, a lot of traveling issues. So still be cautious with that. Give yourself plenty of time. Pay attention to what you're doing. There's still a strong chance of technical issues and breakdowns of things with this Mercury retrograde. But now that the sun is the ruler of Mercury, I think the Mercury is much stronger with the sun in Leo. But there's still those potentials of mishaps and stuff with technical and transportation, traveling stuff. But still, in this moment, on Saturday morning, it feels like, it could be a good time of some sort of a short trip or something like that. Or just being more curious and learning things, or in communications, networking, publishing, any kind of things like that on Saturday. And then the moon is trying that Chiron that can make people's mood feel a little more confident. Confidence should be building no matter what because of this Leo cycle. And people just more comfortable with vulnerability and some of their private inner stuff going on there. Where am I at here? Okay, and then the moon will change signs. So most of the day, as the moon is building up to the end of Leo, there's a sense of urgency for things. But then the moon changes signs into Virgo, and there's a big mood change, and things get a little more, something is changing by Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, Saturday night, depending on where you are in the world. As the moon comes into Virgo, now it's being ruled by this Mercury retrograde. It still leads back to the sun, but now with the moon in Virgo, it's picking up on that square instantly to Uranus, and then the moon will also have to adapt in conjunction to all of the outer planets. In fact, even a finger of God aspect, a wider orb, Well, it'll be perfect at 2 degrees from Neptune and Pluto. So something more fateful. The mood and the circumstances become more volatile, changeable, changing of mood and feelings, generally speaking. Something more surprising, unpredictable, unexpected could be taking place on Saturday evening, Saturday night. And with the moon coming into Virgo, now it's really more about this Mars and this South Node area that's talking about what has needed to be purged and purified. The moon here shows that people want to get more practical. It's less about this fun, joy, creativity, self-expression, even though that's the bigger part of the whole cycle. In the short term here, the moon shows that people want to get down to earth, to be more practical, get more focused on things, work projects, but just be prepared. Like, prepare yourself for Saturday evening and night to be more open. This is now mutable, more flexible and adaptable to changes. Don't be too fixed and stubborn. Typically, Leo season is a more fixed and stubborn sign or season, generally speaking. And now people have to be more flexible and adaptable to things that are outside their control, things that are changing. Plans could go through changes. Here it's not going to affect every single person. Don't get me wrong. This is the general background on Saturday evening, Saturday night. But it still shows some changing dynamics that are a little more uncomfortable and a little more critical. So generally, for the next 2.5 days, there is a stronger emotional need to be working on things, projects, going back and dealing with things of the past. Again, purging, purifying your life, reorganizing things, restructuring things. What do you have to let go? That's still continuing to be a part of the future. Again, in order to move forward in the future, some things of the past still have to be completed. And that could be a part of what's coming up emotionally in this phase for people. But again, it could also be health stuff, that's having more attention, which Mars has already been activating for a lot of people about health. So when the moon comes in, remember the moon is waxing through here for the next 2.5 days. So Virgo is all about making improvements to things, making things better, which why sometimes it can come across as a little critical, because it can see what needs to change, where things need to go, and put things in their proper place and order. And it's not as comfortable with being too scattered, doing too many things with this Uranus and Gemini, that's kind of all over the place, a little more crazy and wild. And the moon, the feelings say, no, let's get organized, let's get practical. So a little bit of some tension there that comes in for Saturday night. Moon will separate, but then that moon, again, is at the apex of a finger of God aspect between the group and the community. So circumstances are having to adjust to the power dynamic that's in play on Saturday night with the community, intense, powerful community stuff, and groups of people and stuff going on Saturday night, having to adjust to Saturn and Neptune, which is kind of more like the government, the local government, the law, in this new way, new rules, new laws, new systems, pointing right towards the circumstances on Saturday night. So I would imagine in some cities around the world, there's going to be some strong dynamics playing out with the community and law enforcement or something. Maybe it could be something other than that too, like just an event or crisis moment there, or something just very fateful that's happening. So if you have any personal planets at 2 degrees of Virgo, then you're wrapped up into that finger of God. You are, the moon might be bringing it to your attention or something happening, but you're already under the finger of God long term from this Pluto and Saturn, Neptune. And now the moon is right there on this lower level. So again, 2 degrees of Virgo is the apex of this strong, fateful dynamic. So the moon, the circumstances and the mood is like really picking up on a lot of different stuff as it comes into Saturday night. It's a little more crazy, a little more dynamic. Just be careful. If you have any plans on Saturday night, just expect the unexpected and just expect things to be kind of chaotic and changeable. So if you're fixed, if you're stubborn, then you might be more affected. But if you're more willing to be like going with the flow and not trying to control everything, then it can be better for you. All right, so those are the main aspects for Saturday night. Be more cautious on Saturday night. I think Friday and Saturday night. All right, moving forward into Sunday, July 27, the moon is continuing to wax through Virgo, talking about what I talked about for Saturday, working on things, getting more practical, down to earth, reorganizing, purging, purifying, making things better, dealing with health in certain circumstances, work and projects and things like that. It's just more of a practical weekend. But the sun is focused on more fun and creativity and recreational things. So, two different vibes going on at the same time. And really, there's just this one aspect, and that's the moon sextile Jupiter on Sunday. So all the other background stuff is still going on that I talked about for Friday and Saturday, but there's only this one sextile, and that's a pretty good sextile overall. This could be great for healing. If you do have any health issues, this can be something good on Sunday around health or news. It's still being ruled, the moon being ruled by Mercury retrograde, but the moon is ruling Jupiter in Cancer. So connecting to the home, the family needs, feeling more nurtured, feeling more like you can have what you want or need on Sunday. Now this is Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, that this aspect is exact. Feeling more generous, feeling like you have what you need to get the job done here, generally speaking, on Sunday. Still could be big feelings, big mood, big circumstances that the moon is connecting to on Sunday as well. But again, only one aspect until we get to Monday on July 28, and here's the moon wrapped up into this fateful karmic dynamic that's been ongoing with the moon conjunct the south node and then the moon conjunct Mars first thing. So it's a fateful day on Monday, but it has a lot to say about the past, or things that are affecting the future that we're dealing with. Just to know it's a fateful point there. And the moon will kind of go through that aspect of the Venus square Mars dynamic and begin to close it out. So relationships next week are at a turning point from where they've been this last couple of weeks by the time we get to this point. But the moon is right next to Mars, so it has a little bit of a critical vibe for next Monday as well, Monday into Tuesday. When the moon is next to Mars, it's more agitated, generally speaking. People are more agitated, more critical in Virgo, more active. But at the same time, because of the south node is like a black hole, it can be draining. It's like a turning point for this certain dynamic about feeling drained or tired or wanting to give up and retreat. With that Mars next to the south node, it kind of like takes away its power a little bit. And now the moon is trying to close that out so that there can be a new dynamic for action and how we proceed forward. But in this moment, it could be a little bit critical for Monday. Now, Venus is sextile that Chiron, so another alternative interpretation could be maybe the masculine feminine is starting to work something out by next week, and then there can be a better sense of relationship and feelings about relationship. There's still a lot of tension because the moon is squaring Venus and it's next to that Mars. So it can either be letting go, releasing things around relationship tension in multiple different ways, either letting the person go completely. I think that happened in some cases already. But it could also just be letting go of the mood, the feelings that have been in place, or again, solving the issue, getting through it in some way, even though there still could be a lot of tension as you're going through that in some cases, some relationships. And the moon next to Mars and in conjunct to Chiron. So still Mars and Chiron are also building this in conjunction by next week, and the moon is activating that. So still having to adjust to a lot of wounds and injuries going on in the world in different ways. A lot about health stuff with that moon in Virgo for 2.5 days there. And then the moon squaring Venus. So this is just not a moment on Monday that's feeling as content, as satisfied. Generally speaking, you're not just able to get everything you want. Your personal desires could be clashing. You might not be it could just be a little tense. Because again, the moon is activating that romantic dynamic, that sexual tension dynamic. I'm not saying it's sexual tension for everybody. That's just one interpretation of Venus-Mars square, is make love or make war. But again, you can use the real world example of learning astrology. So looking back to that event of that CEO that got caught cheating at the concert, that's a great example of that dynamic. So, guess what? There was a lot of tension when he got home with his wife, and that has been in play ever since. So anyway, and in the world itself, and just that whole dynamic is just a great example of how this can play out. So there's another continuation of that in some way, perhaps on Monday, or a turning point. It's really a turning point away from that's been in play, but it's coming up again in some way here on Monday. So just be careful of relationship dynamics on Monday. Don't try not to be too critical, and just don't expect to have everything in that moment. The moon will change signs and things will start to change though. And that's what will happen after the moon squares Venus. The moon ingresses into Libra, and now Venus is in charge of the circumstances. And now this moon connects to this kite with all the outer planets. And Venus is in charge. Venus is sextile Chiron in a better way, and then Venus will be changing signs. So again, this is the turning point for a lot of the critical dynamics in relationships, and stuff wants to start to smooth out. Now that the moon is in Libra, generally people want to be more diplomatic, more graceful, more charming, be more of a people person, or weigh things out, being more objective and intellectual and communicative about things, less critical. I think Mars here is still showing some criticism, some critical thoughts, and things are still ongoing, but the circumstances, the mood really begin to change it. And even more so as time goes on, and the moon is going through Libra the next 2.5 days, ruled by Venus, but also a sense of urgency for things to start to change. When the moon is going through Libra, Venus will be reaching the last critical degrees before it changes signs next week into Cancer, which will really start to sensitize relationships and preferences and the feminine energy. And the feminine in relationships will kind of come out of the mind and come down into a more physical, emotional place by next week. And it starts with this moon phase, trying to weigh things out, trying to be more compromising and diplomatic and graceful and make deals, things like that, as we get into Monday into Tuesday. All right, so that's what I have. I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And you all take good care. Catch you on the next one.